today at our LightFair post-game show webinar. My name is Armando Berdiel with the Lighting Design Lab. And today, joining us, we have Sean Dara, my colleague at Lighting Design Lab, and Britton Rife with NEEC's Smart Building Center. Very excited for our show we have for you today, so bear with us. Couple of quick notices before we start. You'll notice you're all muted, but please engage with us in the chat feature at the bottom right of the GoToWebinar panel. We're likely going to be saving questions for the end, although if there's pressing questions that are very time sensitive, I'm sure we'll address them. After the webinar, please take the short survey. It's about 30 seconds, few questions. Let us know how we did. Great feedback for us, ensuring that we provide a better experience for our audience. And a recording as well as a video, recording as well as a PDF version of the slides are going to be on our website's education page and resources page. Any questions, please reach out to our email below. Just always have it with our presentations. Lighting Design Lab is powered by Seattle City Light. We are very much a department and employees of the city of Seattle. Slide, please. However, it does take a village for us to do all the programming and work that we really like to do, not doing it by ourselves, especially, great example today, we're partnering with the Smart Building Center as we deliver this webinar. We also work a lot with the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, with the University of Washington's Integrated Design Lab. We like to collaborate in the region and the industry in order to provide the latest and greatest in connected lighting and electrification topics. Next slide, please. This is a quick breakdown of our 4 core services. We love to provide solid education and training, such as our webinars, and can't wait to get back to in-person trainings. Solid amount of technology evaluations, demonstrations, pilots. We develop tools and resources like lighting guides, luminaire level lighting control videos and guides, and information aggregation specialists. We keep our ears close to the ground on the latest and greatest in the lighting and electrification industries, and we provide that information to our audience. Right now, I'm going to hand it off to our colleague, Britton Rife, to introduce herself and talk a little bit about the Smart Building Center.
Thank you, Armando. As you said, my name is Britton Rife. I'm a project manager at the Smart Building Center, and I'd like to thank the Lighting Design Lab for hosting this webinar. Hopefully, we'll be able to hold a similar event in person at our physical office space in the Pacific Tower on Beacon Hill and bring everyone together. So the Smart Building Center is an industry innovation center. We run a 501c3 called the Smart Building Center Education Program. And the mission of SBCEP is to accelerate the adoption and commercialization of smart building technologies and practices through education and demonstration. So we work to achieve this mission by delivering training programs to educate the building workforce of the future, enabling industry-leading demonstration projects, and connecting the industry through hosting events. So under each of the pillars, you can see some of our programs and activities. On the education and training side, the Building Operator Certification Program is one of our main programs, and I'll touch on that here in a little bit. We host a series of technical webinars each year, which I'll also talk about. And then we also have recorded content from our live and remote education and training events available on our YouTube channel. Under the demonstration pillar, we have a diagnostic tool lending library, which I'll also talk a little bit about. We do data visualization and host building or site visit tours to showcase some of the smart technologies and practices. And then under events, our physical office space has a training room and a conference room that industry members can utilize for free. We host a series of what we call Why Smart executive forums that explore different topics under the Smart Buildings umbrella. And then we also have an annual Smart Buildings Exchange Conference, which we held this past August and will be holding sometime again in likely late summer next year. Next slide. So SBC runs the National Building Operator Certification Program, which is the leading training and certification program for building engineers and maintenance personnel across the country. And the BOC curriculum aims to teach graduates how to find practical, low and no cost efficiency solutions by optimizing the performance of existing building systems. So shown here are our core classes for the level 1 and level 2 curriculum. So level 1 is focused on building systems maintenance, and level 2 is focused on improving building operational performance. We're also now offering a new entry-level course called Fundamentals of Energy Efficient Building Operations, and that's geared towards people who are new to the field or looking to establish a solid foundational understanding of energy efficiency in building systems. So you can learn more about the Fundamentals course, level 1 and level 2, at the link shown there on the slides. And I just wanted to highlight that the level 1 course, BOC 1003 on efficient lighting fundamentals, covers evaluation of lighting levels, quality and maintenance, lighting fixture and control technologies, common upgrades, retrofit and redesigns, and management strategies. So just kind of a taste of the lighting topics we touch on in the BOC curriculum. Next slide. And because we're focused on lighting technologies and trends today, I wanted to highlight some of our existing technical webinars that cover lighting topics. So those are shown there on the screen, and you can access our full library of recorded webinars at that link shown there. We of course have other topics under the BOC curriculum like HVAC systems, smart building technologies, water efficiency, indoor environmental quality, and more available in the recorded webinar library. Next slide. And then, as I mentioned briefly earlier, we have a diagnostic tool lending library at our physical office space. We have 85 different types of diagnostic and monitoring tools that are available for free for use in commercial and institutional buildings in Washington and Oregon. So there's a really easy online reservation system where you can go in and browse our inventory and reserve tools for up to 4 weeks. And if you're local, you can pick them up, or if you're a little further away, we can ship them to you. And then pictured here are some of the lighting related tools that we have available: luminance meter, handheld light meters, and an occupancy and lighting loggers. So if you haven't already, you can check out the tool lending library at that link shown there. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I know my contact information will be shared a little later, but for now, I will hand it over to Sean so that he can start telling us all about LightFair and the latest in lighting.
Thank you, Britton. We at the Lighting Lab love collaborating with the folks at NEEC. So in particular, please do make use of their tool lending library. Luminance meters are not the easiest things to find. That's how you tell how brightness is. So please go ahead and engage with those folks. So thanks. For those who don't know me, I am Sean Dara, Senior Lighting Specialist here at the Lighting Design Lab and longtime lighting designer throughout the Seattle area and a variety of other places. So we're here to talk about LightFair. We are very fortunate this year. LightFair last year, of course, 2020 didn't happen. There was some odd thing going on. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but it had to get canceled, right? So this summer, it looked like LightFair was really gonna spring back really hard. It got rescheduled from the spring into October, and things were really looking up. It's kind of backslid a little bit. So let's just say that we are very fortunate and give great thanks to the professional staff at LightFair, at the Illuminating Engineering Society, and the International Association of Lighting Designers, who worked really hard to provide us with an actual in-person event this year. So you're gonna see a number of images, you're gonna see a lot of information here. Let's just say that LightFair was a little muted this year, right? We had a much smaller fair, we had a much smaller attendance, but what we lacked perhaps in scale, we made up for in quality. Let's go with that. But again, very many thanks. Now, one of the key things that I noticed on one of the days that I walked through is I discovered where Pigeons Local 101 takes their coffee breaks. You'll notice right in front of us right there, that's Javits Center. A little bit later, well, coffee break was over, so the pigeons were back hard at work. So a quick bit, this is a little bit about what the show floor looked like this year. Now, you would typically expect this to be about 5 times as large as it actually was this year. Now, you'll also notice that it doesn't look like there's a lot of people there, and apologies for that, because I took these photos at times when I had the ability to take a few moments. So there were a lot more people there than the photos would suggest, but it will give you some sense that this year, instead of the large big manufacturer booths that you saw with lighting fixtures and lighting control manufacturers, there was a lot more table topping, there was a lot more small booth stuff. And the interesting thing was that allowed the people that were there to actually have more of an interpersonal face-to-face time with a variety of people, rather than going ahead and just having sort of the big crush of everybody and trying to see everything. So, you know, there are pluses and minuses to it. Now, of course, for us, Armando and I went and presented the network lighting controls 2-day hands-on class that I've developed for the lab several years ago. Many of you on the call, I think, will have either been aware of this class or will have taken it. Hopefully, we will be able to offer it again in the Pacific Northwest here in person sometime soon. But it took a little more coordination than normal, given the vagaries of LightFair during COVID. So one of them was that, given that the schedule change, we had to ship our very heavy demonstration cases to my hotel instead of to Javits Center. So Armando and I got our exercise in the very first day, taking our cases on a walk through Manhattan for 1.5 miles. So we got there in good style, set ourselves up, and Armando wanted to take this photo because we look fairly similar for the first day. Now, we had an interesting group of students. The last time that I taught this at LightFair, we actually had 29 students, which is an enormous commitment for a 2-day class, right? So you're, in this particular case, you're in New York for 2 days. This really, to me, shows the commitment to hands-on lighting controls education and the need to keep pushing it forward. So even during COVID time, we actually had 16 students, which was, let's just say that everybody seemed quite pleased with that. Interesting mix. We had contractors, rep salespeople, a couple of ESCOs, a couple of lighting designers, and 3 utility staff, maybe 4 utility staff, actually. Another interesting part of this was, given the, again, vagaries of LightFair this year, everybody in the group was from east of the Mississippi. So a number, I'll say maybe half, were sort of local to the Northeast, and the other half were kind of scattered from Texas, Tennessee, Florida, a variety of different people. So Armando, why don't you take it and go ahead and thank our manufacturer participants for us.
Definitely. So if you've seen our class before, and if you haven't, the second half of our hands-on network lighting controls workshop, we do have a hands-on programming commissioning rotation. And this year we had 3 manufacturers who sent representatives to help facilitate those programming rotations, where we have participants, again, rotate through programming the different systems. First, we had Luz Garcia from Crestron and their network lighting control platform called Zoom. She is the West Coast Regional Sales Manager, awesome to work with, has been working with us for a very long time, so really appreciate her supporting us LightFair this year as well. Next, we had Michael Lunn from Cooper, formerly known as Eaton, formerly known as Cooper, with the platform Cooper Wavelengths. Again, very appreciative of him joining us. I think he's overseeing the Halo fixture line at this point in Cooper. And then we have Adam Gray with Lutron Vibe. Again, joined us slightly short notice, so appreciated him being just very adaptable and flexible with us. Awesome, awesome. Next slide, please, Sean. And as the slide turns, Again, the end of the first day had a sequence of operations exercise where we broke up our class into 3 groups. All had a good opportunity to outfit a common office space, you know, open office, conference room, private office with controls. They gave us their own narrative. They talked about what they learned in class in terms of, you know, daylighting and code and all that good stuff. So great exercise. And again, some additional images of the programming rotations as they were facilitated by the representatives and us, Sean and myself, walking around. Go one more slide, please, Sean. I'm still, there you go. Very surprised and very happy myself of Puerto Rican and Mexican descent, where 5 out of the 17 people in the room on the second day were of Latinx descent. And again, it's not very common in lighting spaces, so we had to take a picture and celebrate it. Very happy to see the 3 of us were from Puerto Rico. Again, make me extremely happy. One gentleman was from Cuba and Luis Garcia from Crestron from Colombia. So again, just made me very happy, and seeing that LightFair made some good connections with them. Looking to follow up. Right now, I'm going to hand it off to Sean again to discuss a little bit of the offerings that LightFair had in terms of sessions.
Armando, it was a really good group of people that we had. We had lots of great engagement from the students and from the manufacturer participants, as Armando noted. So from an educational standpoint, one of the key reasons to go to LightFair, of course, is to be able to collect additional lighting information and also collect CEUs, right? Let's face it, some of us have those things. So there was, of course, a somewhat smaller offering of educational opportunities this year at LightFair, but we had some really good ones. If we look at the pre-conference, for example, we'll notice that the pre-conference, by the way, they also call it LightFair Institute. So this is typically the 2 days before the actual trade show portion opens, and this allows for deep dive education. So, for example, there were 3 2-day classes this year. Craig Bernicker gave an intermediate lighting course. We gave our network lighting controls hands-on class, and Dialux. So Dialux is a competitor to AGI 32. They're a computer simulation system from Europe that actually gave a 2-day class as well. And you'll see that a number of other classes, and this is going to be a theme that continues on, and it's a theme from previous LightFairs as well. So pay attention to this in the lighting industry. The classes predominantly are about lighting controls, light and health. In this particular case, lighting design and lighting simulation, but over and over and again, we're seeing a real interest in classes and educational opportunities for lighting controls, and what we're seeing from the latest researchers having to do with light and health, and in particular, circadian lighting, things with your physiology. So another part of this on Wednesday, when the conference, the actual trade show conference opened up, this is a listing of all of the events. Now, these aren't all just, of course, educational opportunities. You'll have things like my headshot, professional headshot, for example. But there was an interesting talk about 10 pounds of light in a 2-pound laptop. What does that mean? That's all about, for example, the IES and the new approach to putting together the documentation for the lighting library, which has all of the lighting library offerings available online now. So, sorry, I just got a phone call coming in on my computer. I had to take care of it. A couple of other things we'll go through: daylight harvesting, and Armando and I will basically tell you some of our key takeaways from the educational opportunities we had. But if we jump through Thursday, you'll see very much the same things: lighting controls, light and health, lighting design. You'll notice also horticultural lighting. We'll talk a little bit about that throughout. And on the last day, somewhat unsurprisingly perhaps, lighting controls, light and health, lighting design. These are the things that are on people's minds, right? So Armando, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of a takeaway from some of the presentations that you saw, and I'll come back and do the same in just a few moments.
Sounds perfect, Sean. Thank you very much. wanted to start with a topic that I'm very happy to see it's getting a lot more attention. You're seeing it a lot more in the recent months and years, but that's topics of light and justice, light and equity. In this presentation, I attended with Mark Lofer and Edward Bartholomew, who, by the way, used to work at the Lighting Design Lab some years ago. And if you follow him on LinkedIn or are aware of his efforts after National Grid, he's been a solid voice of light and justice for some time now. But it's a great message ensuring that we keep diversity and equity when we're looking at design. It was a great conversation where it was a balance between, hey, they were discussing outdoor lighting and what is the perfect balance of leveraging lighting to help reduce crime or to ensure that there's not too much light pollution inequities, because a space that is overlit can be not considered the healthiest for the occupants of that space. And bringing up the points where, hey, BIPOC communities are often overlit, often zoned around industrial areas, whereas other more privileged or wealthier communities have more darkness, trees, or what you could consider better or good lighting. And shouting out the message that it should not be a privilege, but an equitable, good lighting design should be equitable across the board. I'll leave it off with, how to overcome light injustice. Beautiful message where they claim, the lighting designer and the lighting design process needs to facilitate conversations with the community stakeholders and help educate on the effects and the requirements of lighting in their spaces. Help bridge that conversation, not just between the decision makers and a project, but with the community that it's going to affect. And you'll see in a very short order, IES, the Illuminating Engineering Society guidelines are going to start having equity components across the board. So beautiful topic. Last thing I'll say is they call it an organization called Design Justice that's starting a chapter in a node, they call it in Seattle. I'll look to engage on their efforts and then hopefully share more when I interface with them. Next slide, please, Sean. So next presentation I attended was a codes and standards presentation led by Yanjong Yao, hopefully pronounced that correctly, and Tanya Hernandez from Acuity Brands, they were introduced by Edward Bartholomew, and he introduced Tanya as a future president of the IES, so keeping the eye out. And this session was at 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m., all about regulations and standards. So not necessarily like the highest energy topic in the world, but I recently joined a standards group, so to me it was extremely exciting. Highlighting how standards will ensure that outcomes are repeatable, acceptable. Standards will look at safety, performance, and testing. Some of the key highlights that I got from it where the Congress has given the Department of Energy powers to regulate LED lighting for energy efficiency. Interestingly enough, they've given them power over lamps. And what is not in the DOE scope are luminaires and drivers. So I found that very, very interesting. However, manufacturers do have to comply to DOE regulations across LED lamps, or they get heavily fined for each infraction, and they consider each infraction each LED lamp sold. Another interesting takeaway that I personally did not know, Energy Star is a joint program of the EPA and the Department of Energy. So to an extent, a government program, and I did not know this, whereas obviously the Design Lights Consortium, DLC, it's a private qualifying body of lighting, not with the government, although many utilities and municipal utilities look at the DLC for qualified lighting products to put in their programs. Next slide, please. And Sean is going to expand a little bit on this presentation I attended around daylight harvesting, led by Craig Berneker, Ruth Taylor of PNNL, and Dan Blitzer, who interestingly enough taught my LC, my lighting certification exam class in 2018. So I got a chance to thank him in person. That was a good experience. But they spoke about the Living Lab, NGLS Living Lab, the next generation lighting systems Living Lab in Parsons in New York, where they've implemented about 14 network lighting control systems. Interestingly enough, they did mention, hey, all systems had some type of implementation issues, whether it be with the specs or with the programming or with the hardware. interesting story, and I think Sean's gonna refer to one of their reports where you can read more of that story. But the one key takeaway I saw from this presentation for me was when they were talking about daylighting on a zone-based application versus luminaire level lighting control or individual luminaires with integrated daylight and occupancy sensors. They saw a bit more consistent illumination and dimming when it came to the zone-based approach, where you have a load controller controlling many fixtures. They saw light level was slightly more uniform, whereas when you had the LLC or the fixtures with the integrated daylight and occupancy sensors, a little bit more discrepancy in the levels of lighting as each responded to daylight. Again, promoting more energy savings, but slightly less uniform lighting. So it is that balance. Do you want to prioritize savings or user comfort satisfaction? Interestingly enough, today we don't have necessarily industry consensus as to how to apply a lot of our control strategies, but it's an ongoing conversation and it's only getting better. Next slide, please. And they also called out a new headquarters for the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, which is in our backyard, and I am very excited to visit. But yeah, NEA has a new headquarters in Portland, and they've outfitted it with a ton of interesting features, an enlightened system with luminaire level lighting controls, demand response capabilities with the open ADR protocol. So again, very excited about looking at the new headquarters, interested in seeing the building and seeing how these technologies are being implemented, manifested, and reporting on their capabilities. Next slide, please. Also saw a very interesting presentation about the Zhaga Consortium. It's an organization that's looking to standardize lighting components. The best way I found to describe the Zhaga applications are, I call them the USB of lighting. And they have various books, they call them, on how they're looking to standardize their different components of luminaires and systems. For quick examples, they call book 18 on the top left, they call out smart interfaces between outdoor luminaires and sensor communication modules. So the idea is to standardize that connection and that connector, so you can have in an outdoor luminaire various sensors that can connect. Hey, this is going to be an occupancy sensor. This one's going to provide 5G. This one's going to provide tilt sensing. Depending on what the needs are, just having that standardized connection. Book 20 is a DALI interface connections with indoor luminaires, those cables with the different low voltage sensors, depending if you need occupancy, daylight, or a combination of different technologies. And again, this specific book 20 does help with your D4I certification. And Sean is going to expand a little bit on DALI and some of his the classes that he attended, and they do call out Zhaga as well. It's a very, very solid partnership there between Zhaga and the DII Alliance. Book 21, it's for, I found this one interesting, linear socketable LED modules. Your actual chips can be modular and replaceable, where if you wanted to, hey, retrofit a luminaire with tunable white chips, or the lumen depreciation in the fixtures is getting too much and you need to replace those chips, making that modular and replaceable is a great idea. So keeping plugged in with Zhaga, I think they have a great USB of lighting application, and I like what they're doing. Next slide, we'll have just a little bit about how they break up their membership. They have some their main regular members, they call it, and some solid names, Osram, Samsung. I think Karen is one of their members as well. And then they have associate and community members, which is different tiers of sponsorship. But the more organizations joining this consortium, the more you'll see standardized lighting, replaceable lighting components. And I personally think it's great in terms of allowing the maximum flexibility and future-proofing a building. And right now, I'm going to hand it off to Sean so he can share some of what he found, the highlights of the presentations he attended.
Thanks, Armando. So let me start out with the next generation luminaire or lighting systems test bed. So Ruth Taylor and Dan Blitzer and Craig Bernicker did a great job of going through some of what they're trying to put together for results for testing daylight harvesting within their next gen test bed. So for those of you who are not familiar with this, you can actually go to the PNNL Pacific Northwest National Labs and download this technical report that will give you actually a little bit of background into the program. So the idea is that they've created a test bed at Parsons New School in New York, where Craig Berniker is the head of the lighting department. And they are testing a variety of different luminaires and control systems. And my recollection is that actually they're all LLC, Armando, they don't have any that are load controller, I don't think. And the discrepancy that we were talking about there had to do with a programmed grouping rather than individual control. But just to give a quick amplification on that. So great program to take a look at. They would be probably the first to tell you that it's not perfectly aligned with real world programs, but the idea is that over time, particularly as we move forward and we all can actually start getting back to offices and classrooms and these things, that we expect to be seeing more data, particularly about really what kinds of energy savings modern daylighting control systems are using, and what the user acceptance is for some of those as we push forward. There was one kind of wait a minute moment that I had in this particular topic, which was I think Craig Berniker misspoke a little bit when he noted that the very first daylighting controls, I think as he said, it mandated in the United States were from ASHRAE 90.1 in 2010. Those of you who have been designers in Seattle for some time will remember that we here in Seattle instituted daylighting control requirements in either the 1996 or 1998 codes. So we tend to be a little bit ahead of even California Title 24. But it was like, wait a minute. So that was a great talk. And moving on from that, it turns out that the next gen lighting systems also are putting together a test bed with Ron Gibbons at Virginia Tech. So those of you who don't know, Ron Gibbons is exterior roadway lighting researcher extraordinaire. He's doing phenomenal work, and partnering up with PNNL, they are testing some of the outdoor lighting controls, particularly things like occupancy sensors. A little bit of background on that, you'll know that if you're in the industry, that energy codes are beginning to really start to mandate things like occupancy sensors on lighting poles. Even when we don't have those mandates, it's a good practice, right? If you don't need to have lights on pedestrian walkways or parking lots burning at full brightness all night, it makes sense to add occupancy sensors. Well, it turns out that a lot of the original work that was done with respect to the applicability of outdoor lighting controls and occupancy sensors was done by the CLTC, California Lighting Technology Center down at UC Davis. Michael Siminovich and his group were working with a company called Echelon. So Echelon had an interesting sensor system that used both PIR and microwave detection, and did actually a pretty darn good job. So fast forward a couple of years, our problem right now is that Echelon got out of the lighting industry, and this test bed that they put together at Virginia Tech, they installed occupancy sensors and systems on from 8 different manufacturers, and they had 8 different sets of issues from the variety of manufacturers. So the question that they're trying to answer is, are these systems robust enough to be really applied from a code standpoint at this point? But more importantly, how can we specify them appropriately, and what can manufacturers and engineers and lighting designers and architects do to try to maximize the effectiveness of these systems. So stand by for more on that. And continuing with the whole controls report out thing, you might be sensing a theme here of some of the things that I was really looking at. They also, Ruth Taylor and Dan Blitzer did a nice report out on the wall station acceptance at Parsons at their next generation lighting system test bed. Now, you might remember, some of you on the call here, that the Lighting Design Lab, as you can see in the slide there, we got a nice call out, a nice shout out from Ruth Taylor for the work that we had recently done in conjunction with the integrated design labs at the University of Washington and Washington State University with Chris Meek and Julia Day, on also the same topic, wall station acceptance, wall station functionality, and how people can interact with them most effectively. We're basically looking at ways to remove barriers to the adoption of advanced or networked lighting controls, right? So a lot of good information there. And again, there's a publication you can look at from them. The next one that I thought was really interesting, Lynn Gomes is well, she's an engineer. She's a mechanical engineer in California. She's also in charge of commissioning, and I forget what company she's from, my apologies, and Shoshana Siegel is a lighting designer from New York. They partnered up together to put together this talk on systems integration. So systems integration is not necessarily a new thing, but they were looking at some of the ways that you can go ahead and do things like initiate or control VAV, variable air volume mechanical systems in buildings through things like occupancy sensors that are connected to the lighting control system. And they went through a variety of different ways to do that, either with direct connections with DDC, direct digital controls, or through larger omnibus kind of control systems through BACnet, Tritium, Niagara, that kind of stuff. So a lot of good information there. And of course, if you're not familiar with the idea of systems integration, it's coming. If you haven't done this before, you might want to consider, if you can, hiring a third-party systems integrator to try to ease the pathway. Let's put it that way. Another thing that was very interesting is DALI, right? So DALI, for those of you who don't know, digital addressable lighting interface. This is not anything new. This is something from Europe. Became very popular in Europe. It's an open source digital protocol for communication between a variety of different devices. When it first came out, typically the majority of devices were fluorescent digital dimming ballasts, right? So Georgia Power actually put together an interesting little talk here. So for those who don't know, Georgia Power has an interesting kind of business model. For outdoor lighting, if there is an outdoor street pole or parking lot pole or pedestrian pole in the state of Georgia, there's a pretty good likelihood that it is owned by Georgia Power and leased back to the owners, right? So everything gets coordinated. Now, Georgia Power has been doing things like integrated mesh networking between all their poles for a long time. And they do that for a lot of different reasons: maintenance, control, ancillary benefits, like, for example, sensors for gunshot detection or pollution detection or things like that. They are converting, in their thing, 900,000 light fixtures to LED with networked lighting controls, and they're actually using DALI, the digital protocol, and something called D4I, which is again another communication protocol, a way to add more robust communication within the outdoor lighting realm. So one of the interesting things about that is also the intersection of DALI and other standards. So in addition to being able to allow two-way communication back and forth, you'll notice that what Georgia Power is doing is adding essentially sensor and communication sockets to their light fixtures. So in this particular image, you'll notice on the top, there's what they call a NEMA, although they were clear to note that it should be called ANSI, 7-pin socket that allows a standardized communication module to be plugged in on the top. And then on the bottom of the fixture, they have a 4-pin Zhaga Book 18 interface, which again, standardization, right? As Armando mentioned, the whole idea of USB. We need to get past this idea in the lighting controls industry that everything has to be unique. We want standardization. So this allows for standardized application of DALI controls, Bluetooth mesh, however they're going to be communicating on some of these levels. So another interesting sort of facet about this is the whole notion of digital communications with respect to lighting and lighting controls, right? Those of you who've been in the industry long enough will know that we had actually done a pretty good job of starting to stamp out 0 to 10 as a control signal for fluorescent dimming. Why? Well, because we didn't have any talkback, right? 0 to 10 is an analog one-way communication technology that doesn't offer a lot of robust capabilities, right? Where digital buses finally had come into their own with some of the lighting control manufacturers with fluorescent dimming ballasts. And we really had terrific levels of control talkback information that all went away when suddenly 0 to 10 came back. So one of the things that I'm expecting, DALI got kind of a bad rap in the US because it took a lot of time to set up and commission initially. I think with a lot of the newer tools, we're going to start to see, hopefully, 0 to 10 starting to be supplanted again and turn back to the notion of digital control and all the benefits that it offers to us, right? Okay. Now, that's enough, I think, about lighting controls for the moment. One of the other things that, of course, anybody who's heard me talk will know that I'm very passionate about the whole notion of light and health, in particular about the circadian entrainment and human physiology issues that we should all be paying attention to with respect to lighting. So one of the interesting talks that I went to was Robert Soler from BIOS. Many of you will have heard him in the past, and goodness, I'm having a moment of forgetting. Dr. Lang, I believe, was the other presenter here, and they were talking about physiology and discovering that what we thought we knew potentially about IPRGCs, intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, may not yet be the whole story, right? So we were talking about, or they were talking about, not just looking at intensity, not just looking at blue light and the cyan light that triggers the serotonin, melatonin cycle. And I'm way oversimplifying this. But what they were suggesting was that there are other potential channels that are involved in this, including, in particular, violet, right? So not ultraviolet, but still far over on the very short set of wavelengths, right? Sub-blue. And they were really starting to look at how different times of the day, particularly natural light, sort of sunrise, sunset, midday, how you would actually get different visual and physiological signals from the sky, from the light that was available. So this is being made practical with some of the research from BIOS, from Robert Soler. In particular, the first thing out of the gate, they looked at putting together essentially a task light that would try to emulate sunrise, sunset, midday, those kinds of things. But it was an interesting talk to start to think about whether or not we really do start to modulate color spectrum. There's sort of various facets of the industry that believe that we should be paying much more attention to intensity of light and directionality of light than to the spectrum of light. So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of plays out through the next little bit. And also, old friend of the lab and an old friend of ours, Jim Benya, was there talking about a variety of different topics having to do with design, science, physiology, and his partner, of course, Deb Burnett, informing a great deal of the information, particularly with respect to human physiology. Deb Burnett has forgotten more about this topic than most of us will ever know. So that was a fascinating talk and a very good discussion. Human physiology, also an interesting discussion about, in particular, salmon fisheries, right? Lighting bridges and how bridges were being lighted and what effect that had on specific kinds of fish habitat, right, in rivers. So enough about, I think, some of the educational stuff we talked about. Let's talk a little bit about products. So this year had the 32nd Annual Innovation Awards at LightFair. This is normally a really fun presentation to go to. Unfortunately, of course, given the vagaries of COVID, it was not held in person. But if you would like, you can go to the URL that's listed here, and you can find a lot more information about the product submissions and winners and all of those kinds of things. You'll see that there was a wide range of product submissions. This is only some of them, in a variety of different categories, ranging from luminaires to lighting controls to components to all kinds of groovy stuff. So go ahead and take some time to visit that URL and cruise through the IES committee that does the Innovation Awards. Huge fun, great group of people, so kudos to them. In particular, every year there are the key winners, right? So this year, TrueTrack from Pure Edge was a key winner. And this is basically a type of track lighting with a very low profile that you can install into a 5/8 inch JIP ceiling without having to break in or interrupt any of the ceiling, either joists from a floor above or any rafters or any of that stuff. So that was super cool. Edison Price was a category winner with Infinity from these guys. They also had a great booth, by the way, when they were there. But it is a system that allows you to start to look at, in this particular case, a suspension, but also going ahead and doing a lot of different applications with respect to slots and curves, and potentially maybe even some coves. And the last one from this year was also from Pure Edge, of the key innovation awards. This is called Laser Line, and this is effectively a suspended line of light. It's kind of, think of it as, in a lot of ways, visually rope light on steroids. And it was really super cool. We'll see a little bit of that in their booth when we see that in mere moments. So Armando, why don't you tell us about 2020? Since LightFair in 2020 got canceled, we really didn't have a chance to highlight the key award winners from that. So take it away.
Exactly. So, you know, that pesky little virus that has disrupted so many aspects of our lives, still commend the LightFair organization on holding their awards, even though they did not have a show last year. And, you know, great way to get started, as if there's not enough value in getting your IES membership. They've uploaded their full library online to their various their various platforms, where you can access and annotate their different documents to your personal needs. I thought it was a great resource, great reference material. You know, their standards, RPs, design guides, where you can personally annotate them. Thought it was a great resource. So solid award from last year. We can go on to the next one. Most innovative product was from the Magellan family. It's called the Cusco suspended pendant where it has multiple shades that surround those hollow centers in a static orbit. They create a soft, sort of like a floral effect, very, very beautiful, very pleasing. And it's all indirect light, as in each shade is a source, and the light source is casting up onto the shaders, creating very even flow. And it's also a low voltage product, where it's going to serve as a framework for evolving low voltage components and platforms. It's a great seeing that as well. Going on to the next one, we have an innovation award for RAB's Light Cloud Smart Receptacle, where the bottom is constantly hot, but as by many code requirements, the top half of that receptacle can be controlled by their programming apps, by the touch on the receptacle itself, or by a system trigger, be occupancy sensor, daylighting, other time clock. And it can have multiple behaviors depending on time of day as well. And it reports on the energy usage, controlling those phantom loads, be it your printers or microwaves or such devices that we consider vampire loads in the space. So yep, very, very solid product, and another great flexible way to help us meet code. Then lastly, we have the Hero Light Shift. It's an adjustable luminaire, and the key call out for this Glint Photonics luminaire is that you don't necessarily need to adjust the track head itself. You can aim the light beam through its controllable tool and system. So great for if you're looking to accent, or in a museum space when they're changing out, sculptures or paintings, and you need to slightly adjust the beam. You can do it without, getting a ladder up to the ceiling. So solid innovation there. So no, great recap on the innovation awards from 2021, 2020. If you go forward one more slide, that's another picture of the show floor. I think Sean mentioned it already. It's about 20% or 1/5 of the size of previous LightFair exhibits. Mostly tabletop displays across the board, although we did have some manufacturers and some companies did bring out solid, large, great booths, but a lot of tabletop displays with the product was there. Again, still commend LightFair on their bravery for holding this in-person show with a lot of variables up in the air, COVID still being a thing. And you can see an image of the map there. Again, not the larger show, but it was a great, more intimate feel, a lot more deeper dive conversations than in previous shows. Go on to the next slide. We'll be talking now about some of the products that, as Sean and I walked the floor, really caught our eye, wanted to discuss a little bit about. And for me, starting with SensorWorks, it's a room-based lighting control system. They started their company in 2017. When I spoke with them, they're mentioning, hey, we have a gateway that's coming, and we're gonna then be a wireless network lighting control system that's not just room-based. It's gonna be building wide and growing from there. Nice call out is their components are all made in the United States, and interesting take as a lot of the global supply chain is having a lot of issues from COVID and many other factors. But hey, made in America and sourced locally. And interesting to note, their occupancy sensors are dual technologies for passive infrared and microphonic, which is also a passive technology, allowing them to still be wireless and battery operated. Go on to the next slide. Thought more so an interesting company to be in the lighting scene, whereas the 2019 LightFair, I saw LG and RCA, more so known for electronics and televisions, having their lighting lines. This year we see Verizon with a smart city lighting application. They have sensor nodes that go on top of exterior luminaires. They're looking to work more so with municipalities and very, have a plethora of smart city applications, the energy monitoring, IoT applications, and looking to develop that growing market or buzzword, smart communities. interesting tangent. We at the Lighting Design Lab are going to be participating in 2 connected community grants provided by the Department of Energy. So again, a concept that is growing more and more. So stay tuned for its applications. If you go to the next slide, calling out Altani, a company that does very nice building integration dashboards. And these are becoming more important as time goes on. Altani, the way they go to market, they leverage third-party lighting control hardware. If you can see from the image, they have Signify components as well as LG components. But the beauty of it is they can take, that third-party controls hardware, aggregate all the data they can take from that into their dashboard. And great for campus management. They were showing, hey, here's a university, and here's the aggregated energy monitoring and reporting for the entire university campus. And we can compare this campus to their sister campus, across the state, and we can compare them side by side. So those dashboarding and aggregation capabilities are just getting smarter and smarter. Obviously, leveraging other non-energy benefits such as asset tracking. They also do space digitalization. So very powerful systems at a building level using lighting as an infrastructure. Really enjoying this trend of reporting and aggregation. Gone to the next slide. It's a product that I actually personally used 2017, where I wore more so a hat as a retrofitter. But for a company called SnapCount by Streamlinks, they are more so a lighting auditing software where their story is more so, hey, we can go from lighting audit to proposal with one platform. You can go around the space with an iPad taking pictures of the different lamps, fixtures, ballasts, controls, all that good stuff, having everything, listing out everything in a room. And what they've added recently is what they call their SnapSource product hub, where you can, after you do the audit, you'll have your benchmark or existing equipment and energy drop, and then you can, in their platform, in their app itself, source proposed replacements. Like if you're going from fluorescent to LED and you're adding controls, you can actually source spec guides and product from manufacturers that keep an updated database of their products in the SnapCount SnapSource platform, and you can draw directly from it. Manufacturers update it constantly, similar to how AGI 32 has the IES files with the lighting metric files. And you can get a very solid proposal by having, hey, you can have, this is your benchmark, and we can propose these different options of new product, and this is what the energy savings and other great stuff would look like. They also have what they call a camera, where if you take that camera with you and you have a recording of the room and the fixtures and the components, it'll create a virtual room. Whereas, hey, you may not be able to go back to the building, but you have a virtual room, a virtual space where you can check what was the part number for that ballast that you had to replace and all that good stuff. So, very, very solid and powerful audit tools to go to proposal. Right now, I'm going to pass it on to Sean, talk about some of the products he saw were very interesting.
Thanks, Armando. So those of you who've been around a little bit, you will know Nichia, enormous chip manufacturer. At the last LightFair, they had a lot of buzz around a couple of particular chips that they had worked on that had high visual performance, and then also a chip that was an integrated color tuning chip. This year, or tunable white, perhaps is a better way to put that. This year, they were touting this H6 chip, which is a very high color performance system that they're touting as being more energy efficient. So it'll come as no surprise to anybody that typically, whether we're talking about fluorescent or whether we're talking about LED, it's long been understood that lower color temperatures meant higher efficacy, meaning higher lumens per watt, higher light outputs. What Nietzsche is saying now is that they are able to achieve these higher 90 plus CRI. I didn't see any TM30 data, so I don't know about that if you're interested in TM30, but efficacies that are closer to what we would normally think of as 80 CRI product. In fact, they won one of the category awards this year in the innovation awards for this particular chip. Again, 90 CRI with an R9, so basically adding a big spike of red into the phosphor really improves the visual qualities without sacrificing so much of the efficacy that we would have before. And I expect this to be really the wave of the future. At some point, we're going to get to a point where you're really not going to get much better with respect to chip efficacy. So really quality of the chips is going to be what people compete on, and also the ability to do tunable white. Now, with respect to tunable white, one of the interesting things is that this LightFair, we had relatively fewer fixture manufacturers on the floor, at least with big displays. So we didn't see as much of a push as we saw 2 years ago with respect to everybody really pushing their color tuning and tunable white capabilities. But we did see a number of manufacturers. This is a really interesting one, Ambient Tech, who has put together a control system with hardware, with software apps, with a variety of other equipment to be able to control or provide repeatable, easily repeatable, tunable white control using actually pulse width modulation to deliver the 0 to 10 volt signal. Don't want to go into that too much in detail, but let's just say that this is a super cool kind of approach. So moving forward, and as a general kind of a thing, assume that most light fixtures are going to wind up being tunable white in the near future, and we're going to have to look into that. Another interesting push is the continuation of Bluetooth as a communications method, right? Bluetooth low energy, Bluetooth SIG, all these kind of things. Avion in particular was there, and they were showing a variety of hardware and software solutions that had things like luminaire level lighting control, group level control, switches, dimmers, all this kind of stuff, and the ability to control large areas through a Bluetooth interface. Interesting stuff. Crestron. Crestron was one of our presenters, one of the people that helped us with respect to their Zoom system. Crestron has added wired lighting control to their wireless Zoom offering. And I think that they added that last year, but of course we didn't have LightFair. So, but the idea is that now Zoom is available wired and wireless, so you have your choice. And of course that's true of a lot of different controls manufacturers. So it's good to see that controls offerings are expanding. So for those folks who really want wired solutions, you have the ability to do that in a networked lighting control sort of solution. One of the interesting things that I really liked actually about seeing what Crestron is doing is that they've also added DALI node controllers. So they can have regular wired or wireless load controllers, 0 to 10, or I think they do Bluetooth control as well. I'd have to go through. They can do phase control dimming, forward and reverse phase, but now they also have the ability to quickly, easily, and inexpensively add DALI drivers, DALI nodes, again, digital addressable lighting interface into their system. So super cool stuff there. Ocean was there with a lot of hardware, a lot of interesting stuff. So those who don't know Ocean, the whole idea behind the Ocean protocol is that they have switches and sensors that are meant to either not require batteries or, in the case of sensors, frequently they will have rechargeable batteries that are powered by you'll notice photovoltaic panels that are on the actual sensors themselves. The button stations use a moving magnet within a coil to produce a small amount of charge in order to send their wireless signal. So cool stuff, and cool to see that the Enocean protocol continues to build over time. A number of different manufacturers offer their products as part of their standard offering. For example, one of the manufacturers we use in our controls is EcoFlex by ETC. They standardized to Enocean. So good stuff there. And then there were, I didn't want to say that there were no lighting manufacturers there, because in spite of the fact that we had relatively smaller booths and relatively fewer lighting manufacturers than we would expect, there were a number of manufacturers that had booths that were showing actual product. Pure Edge, of course, showing their track and laser line that both won awards this year for innovation. Modern Forms was there with some of their interesting stuff. In particular, some of the big LED-based chandeliers and those kinds of things. This was an interesting one. Alus was there with a big Alus was there with a big for this year's LightFair booth, and I've been doing this for a while, and I had never actually heard of Alus before. So I am going to give them huge credit for actually showing up to LightFair during COVID and showing us what they had to offer. So good for them. Also, the astute observer will note Mr. Steve Rosen from Available Light there. Now, Artica also was there presenting. So Artica had a lot of new information and new material, particularly some of their high fashion equipment that they're showing. Next, horticultural lighting. There were a number of horticultural lighting manufacturers that actually were presenting. I don't remember exactly which one this was. I apologize, but it was an interesting add to the show. We saw horticultural lighting at the last LightFair and probably the LightFair before, but it's really now becoming a mainstream offering from LightFair. And also a mainstream offering in a number of areas. One of the things that Javits Center has as part of their renovation is that they've got a garden on the roof where they actually produce some of their produce for the restaurants there. And in particular here, you'll see that they've got horticultural lighting on their lowest level that we kind of kept walking past, where they're doing seed starts, right? So a little bit of cool stuff for the future there. Edison Price, of course. Edison Price, one of the longest running lighting manufacturers, high performance, high-end lighting manufacturers in the United States, started in the 50s by Edison Price himself, was there in their hometown with a big booth showing a lot of interesting stuff. And of course, Edison Price was also a category, sorry, not a category, but a top winner for most innovative product this year, or one of the most innovative products. So that's a quick look at the show floor. I hope this gives you a sense of what was available, what we could take a look at, how we could engage. But this really doesn't tell you, again, is, you know, if you go back and you think about some of the panorama shots that I took, sort of, you know, giving you a 180 or 360 degree view in some cases of the show. While the booths were a little smaller, really, really engaging people. So the people that came, I think uniformly really came away with the idea that they had a lot of good discussion, a lot of good engagement with the design, the construction, the sales communities. So again, kudos to everybody for pulling off an in-person event this year. All right, let me hand this back to Armando for a little bit of his final thoughts, and I'll be back in a few moments.
Awesome, and thank you very much, Sean, for the rundown and summary. Again, been talking about network lighting controls for the past 3 years with Lighting Design Lab. So my final thoughts as I finished up with LightFair were more so revolving around controls, whereas, they've been maturing. NLC is a lot better than it was 10, 15 years ago. It's getting a lot easier to do things very well, to implement the control strategies well. Regulatory and state requirements, and other bodies such as LEED, the well building standard, energy codes are naming controls as requirement in projects. You're going to see them be more ubiquitous and mainstream and more so new construction, private projects. However, still a slight adoption lag when it comes to utility funded projects, utility retrofit applications. So very interesting disconnect there. Some of the thoughts and some of the conversations are in LightFair around this topic is that it's very implementer dependent. The technology is going to do what it's programmed to do. Systems, hardware, usually working very solidly these days. And as I mentioned before, there's no real consensus as to how the industry, best practices are on, hey, how do we set up daylighting? How do we engrave a wall station? John mentioned before Ruth Taylor's presentation on wall stations. There's still a good amount of confusion on, what type of engraving would you have? What images can buttons have? Do we have raise and lower or not? There's still a lot of tenant occupancy preferences that can impact those adoption numbers. Sean also mentioned around integration. When we're talking about multiple building systems, as part of the CSI, the Construction Standards Institute, you'll have in the construction document, lighting, HVAC, other smart system integrations, all in different documents, your Division 2.4, Division 2.5, or the electric and lighting Division 2.6 documents. That's why it's very key sometimes to hire, Sean mentioned, a third-party system integrator to help bridge all those communications, and not just across multiple systems, but even if it's just a lighting project, be it the lighting designer or controls expert, to help bridge the communications across a lot of the stakeholders, in the sense that, controls are getting more powerful with, again, more intuitive and easy to implement user interfaces, but it's still a huge conversation to ensure, hey, what do we want a system to do? Let's make sure it does it, and make sure we report out our wins so others can repeat what we're doing. So as haven't mentioned it, but also attended a NIA one-to-one retrofit presentation, and we've covered a lot of that one-to-one retrofit study that NIA did last year in our classes enough. But in the panel, we asked the question, what is the missing component to get that adoption boost we need in utility-funded projects? And the response from the panel was education. So we will continue speaking the good word of network lighting controls, luminaire level lighting controls, and lighting. That is my final thoughts. Sean, continue on with yours.
Thanks, Armando. So Armando has just kind of really given a quick push towards education, and I think we continue to need education. I've been doing lighting controls trainings and teaching for, more than 30 years now. And the thing that I usually tell people is that when I started doing this, the toggle switch was the enemy. Now, 30 odd years later, the toggle switch is still the enemy. So bear that in mind. We really need to push forward on some of that. Now, my final thoughts, my big final thoughts are really basically the same thoughts I've had for a while now. So the path forward, what we're seeing with respect to lighting controls, all these things, has to do with the intersection of the technology, right? So we've now got a ubiquitous light source that is super efficacious in LEDs. We have the ability to do easy color tuning with respect to those LEDs, at least within the range of tunable white, right? Light that we would think of as tunable white, and spectral characteristics there. We have the ubiquity now of network lighting controls that are tremendously effective, relatively easy to install and start up, and also cheaper than they've ever been before. So we're really at an interesting intersection where light and health is coming really into the forefront, right? It's been stalled a little bit in the last year and a half by some crazy little virus that's, getting all the attention. But 2 years ago, all of the public press around lighting had to do with circadian entrainment, how to get a good night's sleep, how to wake up, how to do alerting function, all these kinds of things. And I have no reason to expect that once people start really going back to the office, that those are the things that are going to really be on people's minds again, right? Particularly after working from home for the last 18, 20 months, whatever that happens to be. And then, of course, we layer onto that, the notion of the Internet of Things. And essentially, the key element there is interoperability. So if we're going to push this notion of light and health, the color quality of the light sources is going to happen. The ability for all of our light sources to be color tunable is going to happen. Let's face it, if manufacturer X has the opportunity to have 3 different SKUs, a light fixture at 3000 Kelvin, 3500 Kelvin, and 4000 Kelvin, or they have the ability to have one SKU that is selectable and is going to be relatively easily controllable based on a lighting control system, they're probably going to do that unless there's a large, I do mean large, upcharge for it, right? Relatively speaking. So that's where we're going. And every major manufacturer that I've talked to in the last 3 or 4 years about this has agreed that within the next little bit, light fixtures are going to be color selectable. So great, we've got that licked. Now, if we start to then make sure that we layer in particularly digital lighting controls, whether they're going to be DALI or similar, something that allows us to go ahead and give a great deal of robust control, it turns out that 5 of the 6 key variables that most researchers are talking about with respect to light and health, with respect to circadian entrainment, are controllable with a good quality lighting control system, right? Intensity of light, yes. Distribution, no, we don't really control the distribution for the most part, but we can control the spectral power distribution. We can control the duration, right? How long the light intensity is at various levels. We can control when light dosage happens, and we can start to control photobiological history, all with lighting controls, both in the workplace and at home. So a lot of that's going to be predicated on the notion of, again, moving forward with high quality lighting controls that hopefully are digital. They might be analog, they might be 0 to 10, but honestly, if we're really pushing forward, we don't do analog phones anymore. We don't do analog switching of televisions anymore. Why do we do analog control of lighting? It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So that's where I think we're going. Those are my big takeaways. And with that, a real thing here is, do you guys have any questions for us? Is there anything that we've said here that might be questionable for you, that you might want to know more information about, or anything that you might have thought you might have seen from this presentation? Again, this is meant to be a big 10,000-foot view overview of what we saw in New York, and potentially what might be coming in the future next year in Las Vegas, and next year in the lighting industry, anything at all.
And again, to ask questions, you see the bottom right chat feature in the GoToWebinar panel.
Ian says, great overview, good takeaways. Thank you, Ian. Appreciate that. I can say from my own personal sense, I was thrilled to finally be able to present my two-day network lighting controls class in person again. The last time I had a chance to actually present to a live audience had been February of 2020, just before COVID struck. So, you know, at that time we had plans to present at LightFair in Vegas, and actually had probably half a dozen other classes scheduled for the lighting control stuff. And it's always a really fun class to present, because I think people get so much out of, particularly the hands-on, the installation of the gear, so they get a chance to install the hardware, then they get a chance to program multiple systems. So you get a real sense of how easy it is really today, compared to even just, as Armando mentioned, 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago, to get some of the controls strategies and controls implementation that we can do now with parts and pieces network lighting controls required very high-end gear, very expensive gear. So it's terrific to see where we've come. Other comments, other questions, other thoughts? Anybody? Going once, going twice, going three times? Anybody else?
Hi, Sean, this is Britton. I just wanted to thank you and Armando again for hosting the webinar and sharing all of your takeaways from the event. And I'm personally really interested in the lighting and justice topic. So please keep us updated as you learn more about any local efforts or the new chapter that's opening here, and ways we can support any work on that subject here.
That's a great one, and Armando, you should address that in just a moment, since you participated with Edward on that one. I will tell you just another quick thing as a resource. If you touch base with Edward Bartholomew, so Edward, as Armando mentioned, is actually an alum of the Lighting Design Lab. In fact, he actually took over for me when I left the lab the very first time. So great fellow, fun guy to be around. He has delivered a number of talks on similar topics, and you might be able to touch base with him and find recordings of some of those. For example, he did one for the Illuminating Engineering Society this spring, and I believe that the recording of that is available. So,
Oh, great.
Armando.
No, definitely, and yeah, calling out again that Design Justice Network organization. It's a national organization, not just on lighting design, although very mostly lighting designers are part of it. I did meet someone in LightFair during Edward's presentation. That's a lighting designer in Seattle, and part of the node in Seattle. So looking to engage with her. Apologies, forgot the name on the top of my mind. So yeah, again, as I better understand vision, mission, and how they're practicing their efforts in our region, we're going to share and we look to be engaged. As it's becoming a bigger conversation, we want to ensure that we address environmental and social injustices of our past, and we keep equity in mind as we design for our future. So yeah, definitely stay tuned. I think we can continue on. Appreciate Eric. Thank you for the info. It was very good and useful. Appreciate the comment. Think we can go on to our.
Sorry, Armando. Was that Jill Cody or Amber Wu or Nishat Tasnim, perhaps?
No,
okay.
It was not.
Sorry.
Yes.
Just thinking of Seattle lighting designers who were there. It's like, because there were not that many of us. So, so great stuff.
Yes.
Anybody else?
We can.
Anybody else? Last chance. All right, Armando, take us home.
All right, on the outro here, hey, next year, LightFair 2022 is going to be in Vegas. So excited to continue on the journey, speaking the good word of controls, light and health, IoT, smart communities, better lighting. And of course, we'll do another post-game show to keep you updated. So stay tuned. And on from there, you know, few outro words from Lighting Design Lab and Nick. If you go on to our upcoming event slide, Sean, again, we're spreading the good word on lighting and electrification topics, and we've been involved in a commercial heat pump water heating series where a couple of weeks ago, we started a 4-part series on design, operations, and maintenance for heat pump water heaters. And upcoming tomorrow, we have our 3rd part of the 4-part series, November 10th from 10 a.m. to noon. Then the last iteration of that series on November 17th, again from 10 to noon. And we're going to finish out our webinar offerings, our Lighting Design Lab webinar offerings for 2021 with heat pump water heating systems for multifamily housing. And I know there's going to be some mention of affordable housing projects and applications there. So another good session to join on December 1st, our last webinar of the year. In our next slide, you'll see contact information for both Sean and myself. Another reminder that a recording of this webinar and the PDF handout of the slides, and again, as Sean mentioned, the QR code to the Innovation Awards are going to be in the PDF of the slides. They're going to be in our resources and education pages on our lightingdesignlab.com website. If we go on to the next slide, you'll see contact info for Britton Wright from the Smart Building Center. Britton, any last words you want to say before we sign off?
Yeah, I just want to thank you all again for hosting and all of you for joining us today. Yeah, please reach out if you have any questions about our programming at the Smart Building Center or the availability of tools in our tool lending library. And then the link there for the Building Operator Certification Program has all of our information about upcoming classes, and we will be posting information about our 2022 webinar series soon, so please stay tuned for that as well.
Awesome, thank you very much, Britton. Final things I'd say, hey, once again, Lighting Design Lab powered by Seattle City Light. We are a department of City Light. Very happy to be so. And hey, that is going to be it for us today. Happy you joined us for our LightFair post-game show webinar. Again, very excited to share the best, latest, and greatest on lighting and electrification topics. So thank you very much, and stay tuned. Hopefully you'll join us for the commercial heat pump water heater sessions, and we'll go on from there. So yeah, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Britton. It's been a good one.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.